On December 8, 2017 at 11:20 a.m., the captain of the towboat Ricky Robinson was heard making his first distress call on VHF Channel 10.
"We're going down."
10 minutes later, he'd try again on Channel 11.
"This is the Ricky Robinson. We are in distress. We are 1 mile down from you and taking on water. Please send someone."
In the maritime world, the phrase marine casualty refers to, quote, an accident involving any vessel other than a public vessel, and can involve a long list of potential occurrences on the water, of anything from grounding to onboard fires, from elisions to founderings. Cautionary, concise, and a bit more on the contemporary side, the Casualty series will be in addition to the primary brick-and-mortar main features, a chance to explore more modern incidents that potentially didn't make headlines, but are just as important and impactful on industry safety. Also, each will typically still have a finalized investigative report as its primary source. The primary source for this incident is the NTSB's Marine Accident Brief, MAB-18/27. The Ricky Robinson. Built in 1976 by the Luis G. Ortiz Boat Company in Louisiana and purchased in 2000 by Wepfer Marine Incorporated of Memphis, Tennessee, the Ricky Robinson was a 66.5-foot long, twin-screw towboat with 2 pairs of rudders. The typical steering or main rudders, each placed aft of the propellers, and the other pair placed forward of the propellers, known as flanking rudders. From Damon Marine Components. When sailing ahead, only the main rudders are used to steer, and at that point, the flanking rudders are not required. When sailing backwards, the propeller turns in the opposite direction, and this is when flanking rudders should be used. Flanking rudders are necessary when a vessel cannot make a turn with the barge convoy, which results in lots of additional steering movements. Now, towboats and tugboats are 2 different types of vessels. A towboat will push another vessel like a barge, using its push knees, which are vertical, padded beams that press up against the barge's hull. And, while tugboats are capable of pushing with their rubberized bow or tire-lined gunnels, they do not have push knees. From Pacific Maritime Group. A towboat, also known as a push tug or push boat, will typically have a squared-off bow, and will tend to have a flat-bottomed hull to work in shallow water. The towboat will connect at the back or stern of the barge or ship it is towing, using facing wires, headlines, and other means of rigidly connecting the 2 vessels together, so they may act as one unit during the tow. And, as a side note, occasionally in the industry, the towboat and vessels being moved, most often barges, are also referred to collectively once they're connected as one tow. Independent, unbiased, and off-limits to sponsors. This channel's generous supporters make it possible for Brick and Mortar to continue being its own sponsor. On Patreon, this generosity comes with benefits like podcast audio-only versions of every new video so you can listen with your device locked, ad-free early access versions of every video, an exclusive online hangout for top-tier patrons, and much more. Our newly launched brickandmortar.com is where your purchases of our unique on-brand merch go directly toward keeping this channel afloat. Links to the website, Patreon, and the official Instagram will be in description and pinned comment. Wepfer Marine operated the Ricky Robinson as a fleet boat on the lower Mississippi River to move barges around the various fleeting areas or docks near Memphis, Tennessee. From NESCOM, fleeting is, quote, a form of tow which involves moving and positioning barges around the harbor. Fleeting operations are conducted by towboats, pushboats, and tugboats. And from Pacific Maritime Group. This type of towing is common on the Mississippi River, known as Mississippi-style towing. If you want to move a large and resistant object in tight quarters or shallow waters, you want control, power, and maneuverability. This calls for a towboat in most cases. Under normal operations, the Ricky Robinson had a crew of 2, a pilot and a deckhand, with the pilot in charge. I'll sometimes be referring to that position as captain for the purposes of this video. From the NTSB. In 2010, the towing vessel Ricky Robinson underwent an extensive dry dock period to replace most of the steel hull at the company's shipyard in Memphis. and its beam was increased by approximately 2 feet. In the pilot house, a window with a downward view was installed beneath the main windows to allow the pilot to observe the deck and to monitor water coming over the bow when the vessel was in a light boat condition. And this is not to be confused with light ship condition, which is generally used in the industry to describe a vessel that is otherwise seaworthy, but does not currently have on board any crew, cargo, consumables, or stores, and the only liquids are those necessary for lubrication or hydraulics. Light boat condition, in this instance, refers to a towboat that's traveling without another vessel to push. Traveling in a light boat condition will play a crucial role later. After these renovations, the Ricky Robinson would measure in at 66.5 feet long, 24 feet wide, a draft depth of just over 8 feet, and with the new twin diesel engines, they now provided 1,400 horsepower, or 700 horsepower to each screw. From the NTSB, shipyard personnel kept records of the maintenance conducted on the Ricky Robinson, according to a comprehensive log referred to as an equipment status spreadsheet. The vessel had a history of leaks in the forward stern void, which were reported on at least 3 occasions, in September 2015, October 2016, and February 2017, but all were marked as resolved. The last time the Ricky Robinson was dry docked was in April of 2017. That dry dock report didn't mention any hull leaks, but it did state that both steering rudder bearings had been replaced. This bearing system had its rudder tubes lubricated with river water, which left the system through the rudder post top seals onto the deck. Webster Marine reportedly told the NTSB that the harder the rudders were worked, the more the water flowed onto the deck. Another detail to keep in mind. One former deckhand who left Webster Marine in September of 2017 informed investigators that the aft voids on the Ricky Robinson needed to be pumped out frequently. From the NTSB, he recalled the hatch for the voids was sealed only when the vessel was, quote, running hard. Otherwise, the vessel would lean, he recalled, and they would pump out the stern all the time to correct the problem, without knowing the source of the water ingress. In one instance, the former deckhand recounted, water washed onto the deck and down into the open stern void while the towing vessel was moving into a tow with its stern upriver. He stated that they almost sank, but were able to get the hatch sealed in time. The pilot who was on board at the time did not recall this event occurring, nor did the company have a record of the event being reported. 2 days before that incident, Webster Marine inspected the Ricky Robinson. They did not document any structural integrity issues in the scuppers, watertight doors, holds, or voids on their monthly inspection checklist. Scuppers, or freeing ports, are holes or drains along the gunnels intended to provide an easy outlet for water on the deck to escape. A vessel's deck is frequently inundated with water for one reason or another, and without a way for that water to be shed, a boat or ship would quickly become swamped. 6 p.m. Thursday, December 7th, 2017. The offgoing pilot of the Ricky Robinson noticed when he first came on shift that the cover had been left off one of the starboard stern voids. He also noted that the void held nearly a foot of water inside. From the NTSB, he asked the offgoing deckhand to pump out the water and to repeat the effort throughout their 12-hour shift each time the vessel leaned a bit to starboard. This offgoing pilot estimated that he made the pumping out request maybe twice. The next morning, Friday, December 8th, 2017. Docked at the barge company's fleet location, near mile 730 on the Mississippi, the 2 crew members started their 12-hour shift aboard the Ricky Robinson at about 6:15 a.m. The offgoing pilot informed the relief pilot, or captain, that all was good with the vessel during the crew changeover. The offgoing pilot also conducted a walkthrough inspection during the changeover using a checklist, as was company policy, and then presumably submitted that form to the dispatcher at the end of the shift. As he was leaving, the offgoing deckhand told the relief deckhand to, quote, keep pumping the stern void, because it had needed pumping 2 or 3 times during their previous shift. This off-going deckhand also placed an electric pump in the void through the open starboard hatch. Neither of the off-going crew reported the void flooding issue to their dispatch office or to Wepfer Marine, and company representatives would later claim to be unaware of the vessel having recurring flooding in its voids. The relief pilot, or captain, was a 35-year-old mariner who'd come up under the pilot apprentice program as a steersman and deckhand. After joining Wepfer Marine in 2007, he'd earned his Coast Guard credentials as a master of towing vessels and served as captain for 4 to 5 years. The relieving deckhand was 19 years old and had been employed by Wepfer for a little over a year. The deckhand was also the captain's stepson. The Ricky Robinson would get underway at about 1100 hours or 11 a.m. from the fleet location toward their destination, the Seacore Terminal, a 4-mile upriver stretch. Because the towboat was full of fuel and water, the vessel was at its minimum freeboard. From the NTSB. The term freeboard is the vertical distance between the waterline and the highest watertight deck. And important to note, ambient temperature at the time was 36 degrees Fahrenheit. The water temperature in the Mississippi was 52 degrees Fahrenheit. Both of the towboat's engine room doors were open at this time, according to the pilot on the Betsy Ross, another nearby company fleet boat. The Ricky Robinson, currently in a light boat condition, was pushing upriver through an estimated 3 to 4 mile per hour current. Using his 2 steering rudders, the captain piloted the towboat at about 6 miles per hour for roughly 20 minutes. Around 11:20 a.m., the pilot of the Betsy Ross said he heard a distress call from the Ricky Robinson on VHF Channel 10.
"We're going down."
Continued from the NTSB. At about 11:25, the Ricky Robinson's course changed dramatically to starboard. During that turn, which brought the vessel toward the left descending bank, its speed decreased from 5.4 to 4.4 miles per hour, before increasing to a maximum speed of approximately 7.6 miles per hour. At 11:26, the last telematic sensor signal received showed the vessel traveling at 6.5 miles per hour. At that time, the towboat was approximately 500 feet from the left descending bank. Now, in this instance, while the vessel did turn toward starboard or to their right, and the riverbank was to the south, according to the Coast Guard, in the Western Rivers marking system, riverbanks are named based on their downstream direction, either left bank and right bank, or left descending bank and right descending bank, from the perspective of looking downstream. At 11:28, the Betsy Ross got underway to try and intercept the Ricky Robinson. The Betsy Ross captain noticed that the towboat was broadside to the river flow in the center of the Mississippi, making for the left bank. At about 11:30, a dispatcher at the nearby Economy Boat Store, a local diesel fuel and supply store for the barge transportation industry, heard another emergency call from the Ricky Robinson, this time on VHF Channel 11.
"This is the Ricky Robinson. We are in distress. We are 1 mile down from you and taking on water. Please send someone."
Other Economy Boat Store employees who overheard this call immediately boarded the company's vessel, Crew Boat 2, and at 11:31, just 1 minute later, they departed the dock. While the Betsy Ross and Crew Boat 2 both accelerated toward the Ricky Robinson, the pilot of the Betsy Ross, a similar style towboat, who was also traveling in a light boat state, looked down at his own main deck for only 20 or 30 seconds to ensure that his vessel was not taking water over the bow. However, when he looked back up, the Ricky Robinson had already disappeared. When the Economy Boat Store employees arrived on or near the scene at 11:35, none of them saw the Ricky Robinson. Instead, they saw 2 backpacks, a mini fridge, a seat cushion, a life jacket, a lunch cooler, some ropes, and an oil sheen on the water. The 65-foot towboat and its crew had sunk near instantly in a reported 65 feet of water. About 4 minutes later, the Betsy Ross also arrived at the last known position of the Ricky Robinson, but it too was unable to locate the stricken vessel and by 11:44, there were 4 vessels searching the area, including 2 more vessels from the economy boat store, all of which were unsuccessful. A Wepfer Marine employee contacted the local U.S. Coast Guard Command Center at about 11:42 a.m. Sector Lower Mississippi River was only 4 miles upstream from the accident site and dispatched a search and rescue response boat, which arrived around 12:20. State and local vessels also aided in the search, along with a local police helicopter. Wepfer Marine sent all its nearby available vessels to search the area, including the riverbanks, but to no avail. There was no sign of the vessel or crew, and after a week of exhaustive searching, the captain and deckhand were presumed lost. No one actually witnessed the Ricky Robinson go down, and the U.S. Coast Guard's attempt to gather surveillance footage from surrounding sources proved unsuccessful as well. This forced investigators to rely on the towboat's position and speed data, its post-salvage state, and its former crew statements for evidence. According to commercialappeal.com, on December 18, 2017, Wepfer Marine and the Coast Guard were able to raise the Ricky Robinson from 65 feet of water in an area with dangerous currents and low visibility just south of Mud Island in Memphis. The hull had not sustained any damage below the waterline, and only one door was found to be open because it had been tied to the stairs on the starboard side. However, the hatches for the aft and forward stern voids on both the port and starboard sides were all found open, and all 4 were missing their covers. In addition, according to the NTSB report, there was, quote, an electric submersible pump found on the starboard aft deck next to the bulwark with both cable and hoses severed. After the incident, Wepfer Marine supplied investigators with a video of the Ricky Robinson in operation post-salvage to show how the towboat operated in a light boat condition while sailing against 2 speeds of current. From the NTSB, in both currents, water comes over the bow rail and onto the forward deck. When the vessel's speed increases, the amount of water increases, flowing down the starboard side all the way to the aft deck, where the stern voids are located, before eventually clearing from the decks through the freeing ports at the bulwarks. After being pulled from the Mississippi, the Ricky Robinson was eventually dry docked and examined for leaks. The NTSB continues, to check for external and internal leakage, the void spaces were each filled with water, and the decks were flooded to determine if water on deck could have leaked into the tanks. No external leakages were found from either of the aft void spaces, nor was there any evidence of leakage of water from one filled void space to the other. In the forward stern void, the starboard side rudder tube that passed through the space appeared to either have corroded, broken, or missing weld seams between the tube and the top deck. During this investigation, officials also found 2 potential red flags in the forward stern void. The first, even though investigators attempted to pump out the void completely, there was still enough water left between the 2 longitudinal frames to fill a quarter of the void's capacity. Because there was no drainage or bilge suction in that area, someone would have to physically enter the space and use a portable pump to dewater the void. And the second, when the forward stern void was mostly filled with water, some of that water flowed into the engine room through a cable canal, which did not appear to have any packing or penetration seals. The off-going crew members on the morning of December 8th noted that the Ricky Robinson had been listing to starboard due to some earlier water ingress in the forward stern void. They were unsure where the leak was coming from. 2 to 3 times during the previous shift, the off-going pilot had asked the off-going deckhand to pump out the void in order to reduce the heel. The final pumping happened during their shift change, which was approximately 5 hours before the incident. Based on this flooding rate, by 11:20 on December 8th, the void would likely have been filled with enough water to cause a starboard list. Also, the pump used to clear the void was found outside the space afterward, which indicated that the incident deckhand likely hadn't done any pumping yet. Internally, water could have seeped into the forward stern void due to the potential leakage from a steering rudder tube that passed through the void or from a damaged or missing weld for the tube. Externally, the water could have come in via the rudder post top seals on the aft main deck. leaked in when water flowed over the bow as the Ricky Robinson traveled in light boat condition, or ingressed through the deck when the vessel sank. The 4 hatch covers for the 2 aft voids had not been visibly damaged, and since there was no evidence that they were forced out during submersion, and the salvors did not remove them, they were likely left open or unsecured during the incident. From the NTSB. Water on deck would have entered the stern voids if the covers were not properly secured. The Ricky Robinson, operating in a light boat condition, was at risk of taking water over the bow and therefore introducing water onto the main deck. Water could travel as far back as the stern, where it could downflood into the tanks and voids through any open or unsecured hatches. At the time of the sinking, the towboat had almost full fuel and water tanks, and the aft void was likely flooded, resulting in a lower freeboard. While the Ricky Robinson traveled into a current of 3 to 4 miles per hour, at a speed of approximately 6 miles per hour, or nearly 10 miles per hour through the water, the vessel likely took water over the bow onto the main deck, where it would have flowed aft toward the open stern void hatches. 2 minutes before the Ricky Robinson sank, the captain turned sharply to starboard and slowed to about 4.4 miles per hour. This shifted the current's flow from ahead to the port beam, and the vessel's speed at the time of the incident exceeded 7 miles per hour as it was headed towards the south or left bank of the Mississippi. The captain presumably did this to try and ground his flooding vessel, since he had already made 2 distress calls and he knew that his towboat was taking on water rapidly. Unfortunately, this starboard turn caused a turning heel to port, which forced the floodwater in the voids to shift from starboard to port and made the port heel even worse. Also, you may remember that Webster Marine reportedly told the NTSB, the harder the rudders were worked, the more the water flowed onto the deck. Continued from the NTSB. The water in both stern voids would have substantially reduced the vessel's aft freeboard, and the turning forces would have allowed the deck edge to submerge, allowing additional water to flow over the aft deck and downflood into the stern voids, increasing the rate of filling to the voids. As the vessel heeled to a larger angle, water would have also downflooded through the open port engine room door, rapidly flooding the engine room. The Ricky Robinson then likely lost stability and quickly capsized, which explains why the Betsy Ross pilot lost sight of the towboat within about 30 seconds. Had the vessel only lost reserve buoyancy due to flooding, it would have taken longer to sink. The safety board determines that the probable cause of the sinking of the towing vessel Ricky Robinson was the captain's decision to proceed with unsecured deck hatches at a speed that resulted in water on deck and the flooding of the aft voids. And, important to note, the NTSB also noted that Webster Marine's inadequate oversight contributed to the sinking by not ensuring that crews kept hatches closed while the towboat was underway, and by not addressing ongoing watertight issues with the voids. While the NTSB usually provides an itemized list of specific recommendations to the parties involved, this was only a Marine Accident Brief for this incident, also known as an MAB, versus the more lengthy Marine Accident Report, or MAR, that you may recall from previous brick-and-mortar videos. This Lessons Learned section will still use the NTSB report, but with a brief like this being less thorough, so too will the conclusions and recommendations. From the NTSB. All vessels must operate in a manner that minimizes the risk of downflooding and progressive flooding. The pilot should ensure all hatches and openings to the hull and deck are kept tightly closed, except when access is needed. Webster Marine's walkthrough inspection checklist required the pilot to ensure that the hatches, though not the doors, were sealed at the beginning of the shift. In a memo to the Coast Guard regarding the flooding and loss of Ricky Robinson, Webster Marine held the deckhand accountable for, quote, not keeping the hatch covers tight and not closing the engine room doors, and blamed the pilot for, quote, producing an excessive rate of speed in a light boat condition. However, former crew members stated that the vessel was operated customarily with watertight hatches and engine room doors open, despite the company's checklist requiring closure of hatches. Webfer Marine's vice president of operations stated that he was unaware of the issue concerning the forward stern void around the time of the accident, although there were several previous cases of water intrusion into the voids on the Ricky Robinson that included repairs. Although the void flooding was such a problem that they required pumping 2 to 3 times per shift, because of the recurring water ingress, the watertight hatch covers had to be kept open to access the voids, leaving the towboat vulnerable to the introduction of water while underway. In the end, the NTSB's final recommendation regarding the sinking of the Ricky Robinson was a familiar reminder of the importance of maintenance and communication. Quote, "Maintenance issues and other conditions affecting the safe operation of a vessel should be promptly reported to the operating company. Reporting systems should provide specific guidance regarding critical equipment, hull integrity, and operational safety. A robust reporting system should also include procedures for company oversight to ensure that crews are reporting issues and that the operating company is tracking and promptly addressing them." During the salvage operation of the Ricky Robinson, the body of the 19-year-old deckhand was discovered, identified, and released to family. Although presumed lost, the body of the captain was never found. After its salvage, the Ricky Robinson was repaired. During this process, 4 dog hatches were added, and the towboat's coaming, a ridge that prevents water incursion, was raised 6 inches, presumably to minimize problems with the water flowing over the deck. The vessel was then put back into service for Webfer Marine, where it reportedly continues to work near Memphis. The family of the deceased crew filed a $5 million lawsuit against Webfer Marine and settled in January of 2020. According to Memphis Commercial Appeal, financial terms of the settlement were not disclosed in court records, though the records show that the beneficiaries include the deceased boat captain's 5 children. Thanks so much for watching, liking, subscribing. You're the reason this channel keeps moving forward. And a special thanks goes out to the following top-tier supporters on Patreon: Virtual Germo, Uday G, Trayson, Steve, Someone on Earth, Skip N, Robert G, Peyton, Paul Z, P Rush, Paul Rohrbaugh, Owen W, Nick C, Nicholas E, Nate, Michael M, Meg T, Maximum Hats, Maxim K, Mark W, Manuel M, Lisa J, Kyle W, Justin S, Joshua S, James L, Hutton G, Hayden Taylor, Green Sea Ships, Emily, Drew Ram R, David M, Colin D, Christian T, Carolyn, Captain Ron S, Broken Spectrum, Brendan C, Brandon W, Bradley B, Bonesaw, Bless Malls, Andrew M, Andrew F, Alex S, Alex N, ADLR, and Aaron M. And don't forget, your safety matters.